This happened when I was working night shift security at a medical office building in Ohio. It wasn't a hospital, just one of those big outpatient buildings with clinics and labs that shut down around 6. After that, it was just me, the cleaning crew for a few hours, and then nothing. Dead quiet. I worked there for almost a year, so I was used to it. Honestly, most nights were boring in a good way. This one night it was winter, around maybe 1:30 in the morning. Snow outside and nobody around. The cleaners had already left. I was sitting at the front desk scrolling my phone and watching the camera feeds like usual. There were about 20 cameras, hallways, stairwells, parking lot, basement storage. I knew all of them by heart. That's when I noticed movement on the third-floor hallway camera. At first I thought it was just the lights flickering weird because the motion detection was kinda sensitive. But then I saw a shape move across the frame, slow and steady, like someone walking. That shouldn't have been possible. The third floor was completely locked down after hours, badge access only, and I had the log on my screen. No swipes since the cleaners left. I leaned forward and watched the screen. The figure stopped near one of the exam rooms and just stood there. No pacing, no fidgeting, just standing. I remember saying out loud, kind of joking to myself, "Yeah, no." Then I grabbed my radio and called Mark, the other guard who worked the opposite wing. He answered, sounding half asleep. I told him I saw movement on the third floor. He asked if it was probably a camera glitch. I said maybe, but it looked off. Mark said he'd meet me at the stairwell. We didn't rush. That's the thing. We weren't scared yet, more annoyed than anything. When we got to the third floor, the hallway lights were on like usual. Everything looked normal. We checked the bathrooms, the supply closets, and the exam rooms, but all are empty. No signs of anyone. Mark laughed it off and said maybe the cleaners forgot to badge out or something. We went back downstairs. About 15 minutes later, I saw it again. Same camera, same hallway. This time the figure was closer to the nurse's station. I zoomed in and felt my stomach tighten. It wasn't blurry like before. It was clearly a person, a guy wearing what looked like scrubs. I checked the badge log again, but there were no signs of entry. I radioed Mark again, and this time he didn't joke. He asked what the person was doing. I told him they were just standing there again, not using a phone, not opening doors, just facing the wall. We went back up, but there was no one. Same result. Empty hallway, no sound, no doors opened, nothing. On the third time it happened, around 3 a.m., Mark refused to come with me. He said something wasn't right and he'd stay downstairs and watch cameras. So I went alone. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed something I hadn't before. One of the exam room lights was on. That room had been locked all night. I knew because it had broken equipment inside and nobody was allowed in. The door was slightly open. I stood there for a minute before pushing it open. The room was empty, but the chair was pulled out and the computer monitor was on. The login screen was up, like someone had just stepped away. I checked the system logs the next day. Someone had logged in at 1:17 a.m. using an old doctor's credentials. That credentials was used by a doctor who had died the year before. HR told us it was probably a system error or reused login data. They said it happened sometimes. Mark quit 2 weeks later. I stayed another month. I never saw the figure again. My name is Daniel. I was working overnight at a call center in Arizona. It was one of those places that handled emergency maintenance calls for apartment complexes. Not 9/11 stuff, just broken pipes, locked out tenant, that kind of thing. The building was a converted warehouse. Big open floor, cubicles, fluorescent lights that never shut off. On night shift there were usually 5 of us. This night there were only 3 because 2 people called out. Me, a girl named Jess, and a supervisor named Ron, who mostly stayed in his office. Around 2 a.m., the calls slowed down. Jess went on break, and Ron went to the bathroom down the hall. That left me alone on the floor. That's when I got a call that didn't show up correctly on the system. No caller ID, no apartment number, nothing. That happened sometimes, so I answered like normal. The guy on the other end whispered my name. I figured it was a prank. I asked him to repeat himself. He said my name again. Clearer this time, like he was right next to the phone. I asked how he got my name. He became silent. Then he said, "You're the only one out there right now." I hung up. I stood there listening to the building. You don't realize how loud silence can be until you're waiting for something to happen. I could hear the hum of the lights, the AC kicking on, and even my own breathing. Jess came back a few minutes later. and I told her about it. She laughed but stayed closer to my desk than usual. Around 3 a.m., Ron came out of his office and asked if either of us had been walking around near the storage area. We said no. He said he kept hearing footsteps outside his door. A few minutes after that, all three of our phones rang at the same time. Same blank caller. Ron answered his. Jess and I just stared at ours. Ron said hello a few times. Then his face changed. He asked who it was. Then he hung up and locked his office door. He didn't tell us what the call was about. He just said we should stick together until morning. At 4:10 a.m., the motion lights in the storage hallway turned on. None of us went to check. We just sat there watching the hallway camera feed. The camera showed a man standing just out of frame. You could see the part of his arm sometimes when he shifted. He never stepped fully into view. When morning shift came in, the hallway was empty. No signs of anyone. No doors forced. No alarms were triggered. The phone system logs showed one incoming call at 2:07 a.m. No audio recorded. No number attached. Ron transferred locations a week later. Jess quit the job. I stayed another few months and never worked overnight again. I worked as a janitor at a small community college in Pennsylvania. As usual, it was a night shift again. It was me and one other guy named Luis. We split the building. I handled the basement, classrooms, and stairwells. He did offices and labs. The basement was mostly storage, old furniture, boxes of paperwork, and maintenance rooms. It smelled like dust and cleaner. Nothing scary, just empty. One night I was mopping near the stairwell when I heard someone humming. It was soft and off-key. Sounded like a guy who didn't know the song well. I assumed it was Luis messing with me. I called his name. Suddenly the humming stopped. I radioed him and asked why he was in the basement. He said he hadn't left the second floor all night. A few minutes later I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, slow and heavy, like someone is tired. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and watched the door. It didn't open. The footsteps stopped right on the other side. I waited there, but nothing happened. When I finally opened the door, the stairwell was empty. The motion light flicked on by itself. Suddenly the humming started again, this time farther down the basement hallway. I didn't follow it. I finished my area as fast as I could and went upstairs to sit with Luis. We checked the cameras together. The basement camera showed someone moving between the shelves. You couldn't see their face, just a shape, slightly hunched and walking slow. Luis' face went pale. He said that looked like the old night janitor who used to work there before us. A guy named Harold. He died of a heart attack in the basement a few years back, found alone between shelves. I was scared and I told him to stop. I didn't want to hear it. The camera feed cut out a few seconds later. Maintenance said the cameras were old and unreliable. They always said that. I quit that job not long after. Sometimes I still think about the humming, mostly because I catch myself doing it when I'm tired late at night without realizing it. And every time I do, I stop immediately.